The chamber is open and full of whispers.
The Sorting Hat takes 11 seconds with Hermione Granger. This is not remarkable to the students watching. 11 seconds feels like a long time when you are 11 years old and standing in front of a school full of strangers, but to anyone paying genuine attention, 11 seconds is nothing. Neville Longbottom waited nearly a full minute. The hat sat on his head like a man reading a very complicated tax document. With Hermione, it takes 11 seconds. Then it opens its brim and says, quite clearly, Ravenclaw. She walks to the blue and bronze table with her chin level and her hands steady. She sits. She folds her hands in her lap. Around her, Ravenclaws applaud with the particular restraint of people who consider enthusiasm a form of intellectual concession. No one notices that her knuckles, beneath the table, are white. Inside the hat, the conversation lasted 6 of those 11 seconds. Gryffindor would have you, it said. Its voice was not a voice exactly, more like a thought that arrived already formed, bypassing the ears entirely. The courage is genuine. The loyalty, too, you would thrive there. But, Hermione said. She did not phrase it as a question. But, the hat agreed, you don't actually want to thrive. You want to understand. There is a difference. Gryffindors run toward the fire. You, Miss Granger, have been cataloging fire's properties since you were 4 years old. She had nothing to say to that. It was accurate. Ravenclaw, said the hat. Try not to let it make you lonely. She chose not to respond to that part. The common room door has no handle. Hermione discovers this at 11:15 that night, after the sorting feast, after the prefect named Edmund Walsh has led them up a spiral staircase so long it felt geological. The door at the top is dark wood, beautifully grained, fitted with a bronze knocker shaped like an eagle mid-flight. There is no handle. There is no keyhole. There is no portrait waiting with a knowing smile and a request for a password. The eagle knocker speaks. Its voice is dry and unhurried. The voice of something that has asked the same class of question for several hundred years and found no answer yet that fully satisfied it. I have cities, but no houses live there. I have mountains, but no trees grow there. I have water, but no fish swim there. I have roads, but no cars drive there. What am I? Behind her, 2 second years are already halfway up the stairs, not breaking stride, having long since stopped finding this remarkable. The other first years shift. Someone makes a small, anxious sound. Hermione says, "A map." The door opens. She walks through it without looking back to see if anyone followed. The common room is circular and cold in the way that rooms are cold when they have been built to face the wind rather than hide from it. The ceiling is midnight blue and tracked with stars that move, not decoratively, not as atmosphere, but as a functional chart, the sky outside rendered precisely above their heads, updated in real time. She looks at it for 4 seconds, identifies Cassiopeia, confirms the chart's accuracy against her own memory, and looks away. The walls are bookshelves and blue silk and arched windows that open onto mountains. The furniture is sparse. No one has left cups of hot chocolate by the fire. No one is playing Exploding Snap on the hearthrug. 3 older students are at separate tables, working in complete silence, facing slightly away from each other. Hermione sits down at an empty table in the corner, the one with the best sightline to the door, the astronomy chart, and the other 3 working students simultaneously, and takes out her copy of A History of Magic. She has already read it. She opens it to page 1 and begins again. By the end of the first week she has a system. Breakfast at 7, not 7:30. The Great Hall is quieter. The owl post arrives, but most students aren't present to intercept it, and she can read without managing her peripheral awareness of who is watching her. Classes from 8:40 onward. She completes all assigned reading by the Thursday of the first week, which means Friday through Sunday are entirely available for supplementary study. She requests additional texts from Professor Flitwick with a handwritten note so precisely worded that he cannot decline without explicitly admitting the request is reasonable. He gives her 4 books. She returns them by Sunday and requests 6 more. "You've read all of these?" Flitwick asks, his voice carrying the particular pitch of an adult who is deciding in real time how to feel about something unexpected. "Twice," Hermione says. The 3rd chapter of Charms Theory, an empirical history, has an internal inconsistency. The author claims the summoning charm derives from the same root as the banishing charm, but the etymology in the appendix contradicts that. The root words are from entirely different branches of the magical Latin. I've written up the discrepancy, if that would be useful. She produces a folded piece of parchment. Flitwick takes it. He reads it. He reads it a second time. Miss Granger, he says slowly. How old are you? 11, she says. I'll be 12 in September. He keeps the parchment. Her Ravenclaw peers regard her with the specific wariness of people who have been the cleverest person in every room they've ever entered, and are recalibrating. Padma Patil is the first to speak to her directly, on the 9th day, in the library, when Hermione is cross-referencing a transfiguration principle between two contradictory sources, and has arranged the books in a pattern that, from Padma's angle, appears chaotic, but from Hermione's angle is a decision tree made physical. Those two don't actually disagree, Padma says, tapping the left-hand book. Fawcett is using the Muggle physics framework, and Grimsby is using the classical magical one. They're describing the same phenomenon from incompatible ontologies. Neither is wrong. Hermione looks up. She looks at Padma for exactly as long as it takes to reassess an assumption. Sit down, she says. It is not an invitation. It is a statement of logical inevitability. Padma sits down. They do not become friends. They become something more useful, two people who make each other think faster. Harry Potter is sorted into Gryffindor. This is a fact Hermione notes in the same way she notes the positions of stars on the common room ceiling, as data, as context, as something that will eventually matter for reasons she cannot yet articulate. She watches him during the sorting without appearing to watch him. He is small, bespectacled, visibly surprised to be here, not in the theatrical way of someone performing humility, but genuinely, quietly startled, the way someone is startled when they open a door and find a room much larger than the exterior suggested. When the hat calls Gryffindor, the table erupts, and he blinks as if the noise is something he's still learning to expect. She files this. She moves on. Ron Weasley is sorted into Gryffindor 17 seconds after Harry. They sit together immediately, with the easy physicality of people who have already decided to know each other, leaning together over the table, already talking. She watches this for 2 seconds longer than is strictly necessary. Then, she looks away. She picks up her fork. She considers whether the ceiling chart is accounting for atmospheric refraction or representing the star positions as if observed from a vacuum. This is, she tells herself, the more interesting question. She is not entirely sure she believes herself. The door riddle on the 31st night asks, what gets stronger the more you take away from it? The 2/3 years behind her in the stairwell offer silence, and then fire in quick succession, clearly arguing between themselves. The knocker waits. It has all the time that bronze has, which is considerable. Hermione says, "A-hole." The door opens. Inside, Padma is already at their table. She has the same charms theory text open and is writing something in margins so small it borders on architectural. She doesn't look up. You were right about the etymology, Padma says. I checked 3 independent sources. Flitwick knows you're right too. He's ordered a replacement textbook from the publisher. Hermione sets down her bag. She takes out her notes. He didn't tell me that, she says. He wouldn't. It means admitting the curriculum text has an error. Padma pauses. You unsettled him. Good, Hermione says. She opens her notebook to a fresh page. At the top, in her smallest handwriting, she writes a single line, a principle she has been refining since the sorting, since the hat's last words, since the first door that required an answer instead of a key. Knowledge is not a reward. It is an instrument. The question is only, for what? She underlines it once. She begins to work. October 31st, 1991, Hogwarts Library. 11:47 in the evening. The screaming book is on the 3rd shelf from the left. Hermione knows this because she has been watching it for 6 weeks. Not constantly. She is not obsessive in the disorganized way, the way that produces mess and neglect and missed meals. She is obsessive in the architectural way, the way that produces systems. Every visit to the library, she walks the perimeter of the restricted section at a distance of exactly 4 feet, spine reading, cataloging titles, mapping the alarm's geography without triggering it. The screaming book is vile compendium of cursed intentions, 3rd shelf, 7 books from the left end. She knows because on October 3rd, a fifth-year Hufflepuff named Calloway opened it by accident, and the sound it produced was less a scream than an accusation. Filch arrived in 40 seconds. She timed it. 40 seconds. And she had been 10 feet from the section when it happened. Filch looked right through her, because she was sitting at a study table with an open Charms textbook, and the expression of someone who had been there for an hour and planned to remain for 2 more. She had been there for 3 hours. She did not plan to leave until she had finished. The time turner comes later. In October of first year, she has only what she came with, a mind that moves faster than the rules were written to accommodate, and the patience to find every gap. The gap she finds first is Professor Flitwick. He trusts her in the specific way that academics trust precocity, not blindly, but with a kind of relieved recognition, the way a specialist feels upon meeting someone who finally speaks their language. She has corrected his textbook. He has kept the parchment. When she asks, in early October, whether there are supplementary texts available on advanced theoretical charms beyond the standard curriculum, he does not ask her to be more specific. He writes a permission slip without looking up from his marking. The permission slip reads, "Miss Granger has my authorization to access texts in the Advanced Charms section of the restricted collection, for purposes of supervised independent study." The Advanced Charms section of the restricted collection is 3 shelves. The shelf directly adjacent to it contains texts on curse theory. Curse theory, properly understood, bleeds directly into transfiguration, which bleeds into ancient magic, which bleeds, if you follow the logic far enough without flinching, into things that have no comfortable academic name. Hermione follows the logic. She does not flinch. Moste Potente Potions is not in the Advanced Charms section. It is 4 shelves away, behind a ward she identifies as sound, based after watching it fail to react to her touching the spine through a layer of parchment pressed against her palm. The ward reads the intent of opening, she theorizes. Not proximity. Not contact with the cover. The specific micro-motion of a cover being drawn back from its pages. She tests this on a Tuesday, 15 minutes before closing, when Madame Pince is reshelving at the far end of the library. She presses parchment flat against the cover of Moste Potente Potions, slides it flush against the spine, and draws the cover back, while holding the parchment between her fingers, and the book's surface. The book opens. Nothing screams. She reads standing up, 11 minutes, until she hears Pince's footsteps change direction. She replaces the book. The parchment goes into her bag. She is at her table and writing an arithmancy proof before Pince rounds the corner. The alchemical section she was looking for is on pages 312 through 341. She has memorized all of it. She will never need to open that book again. November 1st, 1991, the morning after Halloween. The school is loud with it. The troll, the Gryffindor corridor, Harry Potter and Ron Weasley, described by increasingly inaccurate accounts as having either subdued the creature or merely survived it, depending on the speaker's investment in drama. Hermione eats breakfast and reads a monograph on runic compression. She has noted that the girl from Gryffindor, the one she had briefly observed during the sorting, the one she has not thought about since, is not at the Gryffindor table. She was in the bathroom, the accounts agree, when the troll entered. She had been crying. Hermione notes this without deciding what it means. She turns a page. Padma sits down across from her with a plate of toast, and the specific expression she wears when she has information she has decided Hermione needs. "The Gryffindor girl," Padma says. "Lavender Brown says she was hiding in the bathroom because Ronald Weasley said something unkind about her in the corridor. That's not my concern," Hermione says. "I know. I'm not suggesting it should be." Padma butters her toast. "I'm noting that Potter and Weasley now appear to consider themselves her friends, which means she has a direct line into the social center of Gryffindor Tower, and Potter is the specific kind of student who draws the headmaster's particular attention. That's a resource with depth." Hermione looks up from the monograph. "You've been watching him," she says. "3rd day of term. He handles himself in ways that don't match his stated background." Padma takes a bite of toast. "You'd noticed too." "First day," Hermione says. "During herbology. The way he moved. He has instincts he doesn't know he has. Reflexes that arrive before the stimulus. Sometimes, the Longbottom boy spilled soil and Potter shifted his weight before the pot finished tipping. Padma sets down her toast. First day, she repeats. Hermione returns to the monograph. I don't need an information pipeline into Gryffindor. I need to understand what is on pages 312 through 341 of Moste Potente Potions, and why the blood-reactive compound in Section 4 requires a pre-existing magical signature as a catalyst. Padma is quiet for a moment. Then, that's in the restricted section. Yes, how did you? Padma stops. Reassesses. Write the method is replicable, Hermione says, if you needed it. This is, from Hermione, the closest thing to an offer of collaboration she has yet made to anyone. Padma understands this. She picks up her toast. I'll let you know, Padma says. December arrives, and with it two things of note. The first is the mirror. She hears it mentioned obliquely, whispers from the Gryffindor table about something on the third floor, something Harry has found, something that shows you what you want most. She catalogues this, files it under unknown magical artifacts, castle, origin unclear. The second is the gap in Magic Most Evil. She finds it on December 3rd, late, 40 minutes after curfew. The library technically closed, but the door to the restricted section still unlocked, because Madame Pince, despite her vigilance, operates on a schedule Hermione has now documented across 11 weeks. Magic Most Evil is not a difficult book to find. It is large, bound in something that is not leather, and it sits with the confident ugliness of an object that has never needed to advertise itself. She opens it, parchment barrier, cover drawn back, no alarm, and turns to the index. The index references a chapter on page 89. The chapter is titled, in the index only, on the subject of objects containing. Page 89 is not there. The pages between 88 and 90 are intact. The binding is sound. The gap is not a torn edge. It is a severing, deliberate, precise, the work of something sharper than a hand. She examines the remaining edges under the light of a lumos held low. The cut is clean. Someone with a very specific intention and a very steady hand removed those pages. She does not find this discouraging. She finds it instructive. Because the most important word in Magic Most Evil's index entry is not the title of the excised chapter. It is the first word of the parenthetical cross-reference beneath it, a reference that the person who cut the pages evidently did not consider worth removing. See also, Secrets of the Darkest Art, Chapter 12. She replaces the book. She extinguishes her lumos. She stands in the dark of the restricted section for exactly 3 seconds, which is how long it takes to make a decision she will not revisit. She does not know where Secrets of the Darkest Art is. It is not on any shelf she has catalogued. It is not in Flitwick's supplementary list. She has not yet read the library's index in full, that comes in second year, with the extra hours the time turner will provide, but the absence of this title from every shelf she has touched thus far is significant. It suggests the book was removed from general access, which means someone has it. Which means she will find out who. She walks out of the restricted section, down the library's central aisle, out into the corridor. Behind her, the library's door swings shut. The lamps along the corridor burn low, gold and guttering, the old kind that don't entirely trust themselves. In her notebook walking, without slowing, she writes, "The censored passage is not an ending. It is a coordinate." She underlines it twice. The request is 4 pages long. Hermione places it on Professor McGonagall's desk with both hands, the way you place something you have thought about for 9 months and do not intend to argue about. The top page is a formal petition. The following 3 pages are supporting documentation, her academic record, a theoretical framework for managing the cognitive load of expanded study hours, and a bibliography of 12 sources on temporal magic that she has read in full, 6 of which are not on any Hogwarts curriculum at any year level. McGonagall reads it with the expression of someone who has been teaching for 39 years and still occasionally encounters a student who makes her feel, briefly, that she is the one sitting the examination. "You're requesting a time turner," she says. She does not phrase it as a question, because it is not one. "Ancient runes and arithmancy aren't offered until 3rd year," Hermione says. I'd like to begin them now, auditing the existing third-year sections under independent study provisions. Both conflict with core classes I'm required to take. The time turner resolves the scheduling constraint without requiring the school to make exceptions to its curriculum structure, which I understand would be administratively inconvenient. McGonagall sets the petition down. She looks at Hermione over her spectacles with an attention that is neither warm nor cold. It is the look of a woman taking a precise measurement. The ministry requires a formal application, McGonagall says, a teacher recommendation, a guarantee of responsible use. Page 2, Hermione says. I've drafted the recommendation text. You would need to sign it. McGonagall picks up page 2. She reads it. She reads it a second time. You drafted your own recommendation, she says. For efficiency, Hermione says. You're welcome to change it. McGonagall does not change it. She signs it. She does this without entirely meaning to, which is a sensation she will think about later, in private, with mild unease. The time turner arrives by Ministry Owl on September 14th. In a locked case with a 7-page instruction document Hermione reads before she opens the case. Twice. Then a third time standing over the case with the document in one hand, and the turner in the other, cross-referencing the physical object against its described specifications. The chain is fine and gold. The hourglass at its center is smaller than she expected, no larger than a coat button. The sand inside it so fine it moves in ways that do not respond to gravity in any direction she tilts it. She tilts it in 6 directions before she is satisfied. The instructions describe 2 rules with the urgency of rules that have been learned through consequences. 1. Do not be seen by a past or future version of yourself. 2. Do not attempt to alter events whose outcomes are already fixed. The instructions do not define how a user is meant to identify which events are fixed. This omission, Hermione notes, is either an oversight or an admission that no one fully understands the answer. She puts the turner on, tucks it under her robes, and adds a third rule of her own: do not use it for anything that cannot be justified in writing. She writes this in her notebook. She dates it. She considers this a binding contract with herself. The extra hours accumulate with the silence of compound interest. Every school day gains 3 hours. She does not use them for sleep, though she uses one of them, twice a week, for exactly 40 minutes of sleep, because she has read enough about cognitive function to know that the returns on consciousness diminish past a certain threshold and she will not allow herself to become inefficient. The remaining time belongs to the library. By October of 2nd year, she has a working map of the restricted section's alarm system, precise enough to move through it in the dark, which she does on moonless nights, because the light from a lumos is visible under the library door, and Filch's patrol route brings him past it at 11:40, and again at 1:15. She is looking for secrets of the darkest art. The accessible shelves of the restricted section do not contain it. She has confirmed this with sufficient thoroughness, every spine she can reach, using the parchment barrier method, drawn back and read. The book is not on any shelf her current technique can open, but the restricted section has perimeters she has not yet crossed. A locked iron cabinet in the easternmost alcove, its ward more complex than anything she has yet defeated, and a sealed reading room behind a panel she has identified but cannot open. She catalogues both as targets and assigns them timelines. She does not find absence discouraging. She finds it directional. Books are rarely removed from restricted collections. The collection itself is the management strategy. A book that cannot be found on the accessible shelves is not gone. It is held somewhere she has not yet found a method to reach, which means it was considered exceptional even by the standards of the exceptional. She files this conclusion. She moves on, because she is 12 and she does not yet have the specific technique she needs. And she does not attempt locks she is not prepared to open. She will be. She gives herself a timeline. December 1992. The chamber is open. The writing appears on the corridor wall in letters 2 feet high. Blood dark. Still faintly wet when she passes it at 7 in the morning on her way to breakfast. She stops. She reads it completely. She looks at Mrs. Norris, suspended by her tail from the torch bracket, eyes white and fixed. Enemies of the air, beware. She takes out her notebook. She writes, petrification, not death. Reversible, agent, unknown. Method, unknown. Connection to Chamber of Secrets requires research. She underlines requires research and keeps walking. The school catastrophizes. This is predictable and largely unhelpful. She goes to the library. The Hogwarts A History entry on the Chamber of Secrets is sparse and confident in the way that sparse entries on unusual subjects usually are, when the author did not have access to primary sources but did not want to admit it. She finds 3 additional references in secondary texts. 2 repeat the same vague founding-era legend without adding information, and 1. Buried in a 1693 survey of Hogwarts' sub-basement architecture, contains a single useful sentence. The lower levels of the castle's eastern foundations, predating the current structure, were reported by castle staff as recently as 1402 to contain passages of Slytherin's own making, sealed against the unworthy. Sealed against the unworthy. She writes this down. She writes beneath it, mechanism, magical, likely blood or lineage-based. Access, not architectural. Note, Slytherin's known affinities, serpents, secrecy, selective access, cross-reference, parcel tongue. She looks at what she has written. She draws a slow line under parcel tongue. Harry Potter speaks to snakes. She saw it at the dueling club, and she has not mentioned this observation to anyone, including Padma, because she is still deciding what it means, and she does not share half-formed conclusions. She is not sharing this one yet. February 1993. A Ravenclaw girl named Penelope Clearwater is found petrified beside a small mirror. Hermione sits with this fact for 6 hours before the mechanism resolves. The mirror. Not a reflective surface used offensively. A reflective surface used defensively. The victim saw the agent through an intermediary, which means the agent's direct gaze is the operative danger, which means the agent kills or petrifies through sight, which means they were looking away, using the mirror to navigate, which means they already knew to be careful, which means someone had been warned. She goes back to the architectural survey. She finds the word serpents. She finds every recorded description of creatures in Slytherin's personal menagerie, a topic with surprisingly generous coverage in 3 obscure magizoological texts from the 1400s. She finds the basilisk. She tears a page from her notebook. She has never done this before. Her notebooks are sequential and intact, and writes on it, "It is a basilisk." Below this, kills via direct eye contact, petrification via indirect gaze, reflection, ghost, camera lens, moves via pipes, controlled by parcel tongue. Spiders flee it. Listen for the voice in the walls. She means this last note for herself. She has been hearing something in the walls for weeks. A low, cold, directionless sound that her rational mind keeps filing as plumbing until she stops letting it. She folds the page and puts it in the inner pocket of her robes, against her ribs. Then, she takes out a fresh notebook page and writes an identical copy to keep at the table. Because she has one piece of information she still needs, where the entrance is. The basilisk is not the whole answer. The basilisk is the mechanism. The question that matters is the controller, and the controller is a person, and the person is somewhere in this school, and Hermione is not going to the library any further without a mirror held in front of her face. She goes to the bathroom and detaches the small cosmetic mirror from the inside of her toiletry kit. It is 2 inches across. It is enough. She is walking back down the corridor, mirror held angled before her, when she passes the statue of the one-eyed witch. She stops. She stands still for 4 seconds, looking at the mirror's reflected image of the corridor behind her, looking at the quality of shadow near the base of the stone. There is something in the walls. Right here. Right now. She can feel the cold of it through the mirror's handle, through her fingers, through the air. She does not run. She walks, at a measured pace, to the Ravenclaw common room, answers the eagle's riddle. I stand between the earth and sky, belonging to neither. I was raised without hands and have stood without moving since before memory began. I am climbed but never finished. I wear your weather without feeling it. What am I? A mountain. The door opens and goes directly to her table. In her notebook she draws a map of the corridor. She marks the statue. She draws a line from it down through the castle's sublevels. Through the 1693 Architectural Survey's Eastern Foundation notation, to a terminus she labels with a single word, there. She sits back. Outside the arched windows, the Scottish mountains are dark and snowless and absolute. The astronomy chart above her head tracks Orion's belt across the ceiling in a slow arc. Indifferent, exact. She notes the time. 2:34 in the morning. She has been awake for 22 hours. She allows herself the 40 minutes. She sets her notebook open at the map. She sleeps sitting up, her head resting on her arm, one hand still holding the pencil. September 1st, 1994. Hogwarts Great Hall. 8:03 in the evening. Dumbledore announces the Triwizard Tournament the way he announces most things that will prove consequential, with warmth, with ceremony, with the specific cadence of a man who has decided how much of the truth constitutes sufficient disclosure. Hermione listens from the Ravenclaw table with her notebook open and her quill moving. She writes, Tournament. 3 tasks. 1 champion per school. Age line 17 minimum. Binding magical contract upon selection. Prize, 1,000 galleons. Glory per the headmaster's framing. Actual incentive structure, unclear. She underlines binding magical contract and draws a small asterisk beside it. She underlines actual incentive structure and draws a box around it. Across the hall, the Gryffindor table is already loud with the specific noise of people making plans they haven't thought through. She can identify Ron Weasley's laugh at 30 feet without looking. She looks anyway, briefly, long enough to note that Harry Potter is not laughing. He is listening with the attentiveness of someone filing information for later, which is, she has observed over 4 years of parallel existence in this school. What he does when something makes him uneasy, before he knows why. She looks back at her notebook. She writes, Potter reads rooms. Underestimated by most. Note, she has written note beside his name before, 3 times in 4 years. She has not yet determined what she is noting toward. The Goblet of Fire is installed in the entrance hall on October 30th, blue, white, and absolute. The age line Dumbledore draws around it, glowing gold and faintly condescending. She examines it from a distance of 6 feet for 4 minutes on her way to dinner, and then again on her way back, from a slightly different angle. Padma appears beside her on the second pass. You're not going to enter, Padma says. It is not a question. No, Hermione says. Because of the age line? Because I have no use for 1,000 galleons or a trophy. She studies the base of the goblet, where the flame meets the stone cup. The fire is not fire. It produces no heat she can detect from 6 feet, and its light is the wrong color for combustion. It is selection made visible. A mechanism for identifying magical distinction and extracting a binding commitment from it. She finds the architecture of it interesting in the way she finds traps interesting, as objects that tell you about the mind that built them. Because you have something more important to do, Padma says. Hermione doesn't confirm this. She writes in her notebook, Goblet, enchanted selection device. Binding mechanism activates on champion designation, not on submission of name. The contract is not with the submitter. It is with whoever the goblet selects. Note the distinction. She caps her quill. The Durmstrang students arrive tomorrow, she says. I want to observe how they carry themselves during the welcome feast. Their curriculum includes the dark arts as practical coursework, not theoretical. That is a pedagogical distinction with behavioral signatures. Padma considers this. You're studying them. I study everything, Hermione says. Come to dinner. Victor Krum is not what she expected, which is itself informative. She expected confidence of the performed variety, the physical ease of someone who has been famous long enough to use it as architecture. What she observes instead is a man who moves through crowds the way she moves through crowds. Efficiently, with minimal engagement, his attention tracking the room rather than performing for it. He sits at the far end of the Slytherin table. The visiting delegations have been placed with their corresponding houses, an arrangement that in Durmstrang's case is at least thematically coherent. And he eats with the focused economy of someone who considers meals a biological requirement, rather than a social event. He catches her watching him. She does not look away. She notes his response, a slight recalibration, the faintest narrowing of attention, which is not discomfort but recognition. He is used to being watched by people who want something from him. He is not used to being watched by people who appear to want nothing at all. She looks back at her notebook. She writes, crumb, internally focused. Observant, likely significant divergence between public perception and actual cognitive profile. Potentially useful. She does not intend to use him. She writes potentially useful beside everyone she observes. It is a habit of intellectual honesty rather than calculation. She does not know yet what she will need, and she refuses to foreclose options on the basis of current ignorance. The Goblet selects its champions on Halloween night. Cedric Diggory for Hogwarts, Fleur Delacour for Beauxbatons, Victor Krum for Durmstrang. 3 names, 3 champions. The Goblet guttering down to grey ash, and the hall applauding in the satisfied way of people who believe the matter is concluded. Then the Goblet flares again. The parchment it produces is smaller than the others. The name on it, read aloud by Dumbledore in a voice that has gone very carefully level, is Harry Potter. The hall goes silent in the lurching way that large groups go silent when the thing that happens is not the thing that was supposed to happen. Hermione is already writing before the silence finishes falling. 4th name. Age line. Unbreached. Potter did not submit his name. The age line would have prevented it, and there are no signs of tampering consistent with a 17-year-old's magical capability. Therefore, submitted by someone else. Mechanism. Sufficient magical power to confound the Goblet's selection logic, or to introduce a 4th school as a nominal competitor, bypassing the 3-school limit. Implication. The submission requires expertise in Confundus charms, or Goblet-specific enchantment, at a level that exceeds standard curriculum. She writes faster. Implication 2. Potter has been entered to bind him to a contract he did not consent to. The contract is binding regardless. Therefore, whoever did this needs Potter in the tournament. The tournament ends in June. Whatever they need him for happens then. She underlines happens then. She draws a line forward on the page and writes, 3rd task, end of June. Whatever this is, it resolves there. Across the hall, Harry Potter is walking toward the door behind the teacher's table, following Dumbledore, his face doing the thing it does when he is frightened, but has decided to be frightened quietly. Ron Weasley is watching him go with an expression she cannot fully interpret from this distance, complicated, she thinks, in ways that are not purely concern. She notes this too, without deciding what to do with it. November moves through December. Harry Potter becomes, by institutional consensus, either a glory-seeking rule-breaker or a reluctant victim of circumstance. Depending on the speaker's prior disposition toward him, both camps argue loudly. Neither camp is asking the question she considers most relevant, which is, what happens at the end of June and who benefits. She has a working list of suspects organized by capability and motive. She does not share it. What she shares, in the controlled way, she shares anything, is a single observation she places in front of Padma on a Thursday evening in November, after the common room has thinned to 4 students, and the astronomy chart above them has rotated Orion past the ceiling's midpoint. Professor Moody, she says. She says it the way you place a chess piece, not as an opening, as a commitment. Padma looks up from her arithmancy problem set. What about him? His magical signature is inconsistent. She says this without elaboration, because Padma is precise enough to ask the right question rather than a general one. Inconsistent how? Fluctuating, as if there are 2 sources occupying the same space at different moments. She has observed this across 8 defense classes, noting the specific quality of the magic he produces. The way it sometimes arrives a half-second before or after his wand movement, as if the connection between intention and output is running through an intermediary. I theorize that Polyjuice Potion achieves biological convergence without achieving full magical convergence, that the native magic of the drinker persists underneath the transformed signature as a second, attenuated layer. I have not been able to verify this independently, but the pattern is consistent with it, and I have no better explanation. Padma is very still. You think Moody is someone else, she says. I think Moody's magical signature has a second layer that does not match his known history. I think it is the most probable explanation for what I have observed. and I am treating it as a working hypothesis rather than a confirmed fact. She closes her notebook. I think whoever entered Harry's name into the goblet has a proximity problem. They needed to be inside the school, continuously, with access to both the goblet and to Potter's movements. Teaching provides that. If you're right, Padma says, that means there's a Death Eater on the staff. Yes. What are you going to do about it? Hermione opens her notebook again. At the top of a fresh page she writes, moody, confirm identity via magical signature analysis, cross-reference with known Death Eater profiles. Method, observe, document, do not confront. Let June come. I'm going to let the tournament proceed, she says. Because whatever the plan is, it requires Harry to reach the end of the third task, which means he is safer inside the tournament than removed from it, until I understand the mechanism. Intervening now would push the plan underground. I need it visible. Padma looks at her for a long moment. The look has something in it that is not quite unease and not quite admiration, and navigates the space between the two with characteristic precision. You're using him as bait, Padma says. You're going to let Harry walk into it. I'm going to let Harry walk toward it, Hermione says, while I dismantle the trap from the outside. She pauses. He is not defenseless. He is considerably less defenseless than most people have concluded. She writes one more line on the page, then closes the notebook. Outside the arched windows, the Scottish winter has closed the mountains in cloud. The stars on the ceiling above them track onward regardless. The chart does not negotiate with weather. It simply continues, exact and indifferent, marking the positions of things too large and too far away to be stopped. The line she wrote, before closing the book, reads, Third task, June. Be there first. September 2nd, 1995, Hogwarts Great Hall. 7:58 in the evening. Dolores Umbridge speaks for 22 minutes. Hermione times it. The speech is structured as reassurance, smooth, pink-voweled, the cadence of institutional authority performing benevolence for an audience it has already decided not to respect. Umbridge thanks Dumbledore with the specific warmth of someone who has already moved to have him removed. She uses the word progress 4 times, ministry 7 times, and for your own good twice, both times in subordinate clauses designed to carry the weight of the sentence without appearing to. Hermione writes in her notebook, Umbridge, D. Senior Undersecretary to the Minister. Political appointment, not educational. Purpose, oversight and curriculum control. Method, incremental decree. Timeline, immediate. She underlines incremental decree. She draws an arrow forward through several blank pages and writes at the terminus, document everything. Every decree, every date, every name. She begins that night. Educational Decree number 22 arrives by Ministry Owl on September 9th, granting the Ministry the power to appoint teachers in the event of a headmaster's failure to do so. Umbridge is appointed Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher retroactively under this decree, which is a legal structure Hermione finds interesting in the way she finds all retroactive justifications interesting, as evidence of a conclusion that preceded its own reasoning. She attends every defense class. She sits in the 3rd row, center, where she has optimal sight lines to the board, the door, and Umbridge's face simultaneously. She takes comprehensive notes on the course content, which is to say, she takes comprehensive notes on what the course content deliberately excludes. No practical spell work, only theory, and not the functional theoretical framework she might have respected, but the Ministry's preferred theoretical framework, which asserts that the current educational environment presents no security threats requiring practical preparation, a position so precisely wrong that she considers it almost elegant in its commitment. She performs the written work flawlessly. She does not raise her hand. She does not argue. She writes a 12-inch essay on the theoretical classification of counterjinxes that is so technically immaculate that Umbridge gives it full marks with a small pink tick and the word satisfactory, good girl in the margin. Hermione reads good girl twice. She closes the essay and files it in a folder she has labeled, in her smallest handwriting, evidence. October 1995. The folder is now 43 pages thick. She has documented 9 educational decrees, 4 instances of Umbridge applying the blood quill in detention, confirmed via a second-year Hufflepuff named Laura Madley who showed Hermione her hand without being asked, just held it out in the corridor with the expression of someone who has run out of other options. 2 instances of Inquisitorial Squad members searching student dormitories without cause, and 1 instance of Umbridge using a tracking charm on the school owls, which Hermione identifies because the magical frequency of the charm interferes with a ward detection array she has been running passively in the East Wing since 3rd year. She sends a copy of the folder, by Muggle post, to a solicitor in Edinburgh. She found the firm in a directory in the Muggle Studies classroom, which she visits on Wednesday afternoons under the pretense of independent research. Because the classroom contains a Muggle telephone she has identified as functional, and a filing cabinet of Muggle reference materials that the current Muggle Studies professor, a well-meaning half-blood who has not updated the curriculum since 1987, has never thought to lock. The solicitor's name is Margaret Holt. She is Muggle. She has no idea what she is receiving. She files it as directed, in a trust document with instructions to release the contents to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement if she receives a specific phrase by Owl within the next calendar year. The phrase is, "The ink has dried." Hermione chose it because it is literal. When the documentation is complete, the ink will have dried. It is not a metaphor. She has no patience for metaphors when plain language is available. November 1995. Padma finds the notebook. Not the main one, the working notebook. The one she carries, the other one. The one she keeps in the false bottom of her trunk beneath a ward sequence she designed herself in 4th year. The one that contains the full research record from every restricted section bypass. The Moody analysis, the goblet theory, the Horcrux cross-reference she arrived at from the magic most evil missing pages, and has not yet been able to confirm. Padma does not open it. She finds it because Hermione, for the first time in 5 years, leaves the trunk unlocked, 30 seconds, moving between classes, an error of fatigue she does not fully register until she sees the trunk sitting open on her return. The notebook is still there, undisturbed, but positioned 2 millimeters from where she left it. Padma, the only person in this room who would notice it and not open it. She says nothing to Padma. That evening, Padma says nothing to her. This is, between them, a complete conversation. She moves the notebook to a different location. She does not make the error again. December 1995. She finds the room of requirement by accident, which is to say she finds it by applying a principle she has held since 1st year, that this castle is older than its documentation, and the gap between what is recorded and what exists is where the most interesting things live. She has been looking for a space to practice wandless magic without triggering the trace, which at 15 still technically applies. Though she has 3 theoretical arguments for why the trace cannot detect intent-based casting when the caster does not conceptualize the action as a spell. She has been making this argument to herself since 3rd year. She has not tested it, in a location where the consequences of being wrong are legal. The room that appears on the 7th floor. When she walks past the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy thinking very specifically about what she needs, is not a practice room. It is a library. Specifically, a library of books the school's actual library does not contain, organized by a logic she cannot immediately identify but which resolves, after 4 minutes of examination, as organized by what the room has determined she is ready for. She stands in the center of it for a long time. Then she finds the aisle the room has put at her eye level and begins to read. January 1996. Educational Decree Number 24 bans all student organizations, teams, groups, and clubs without Umbridge's personal approval. Hermione reads it on the notice board with her coat still on, having come directly from the library. She reads it completely, twice identifying the legal mechanism. It is framed as a safety provision, which means it falls under the Hogwarts Board of Governors' jurisdiction rather than the Ministry's, which means it has a specific procedural vulnerability in the event of a governor challenge. She does not form or join a student defense group. She notes, with clinical precision, that Harry Potter and a significant number of students from multiple houses have done exactly that, meeting in what she has triangulated, from traffic patterns and timing, to be the room of requirement. She knows what is in the room of requirement. She has been there 6 times. She chooses not to inform them of this, because the room they are finding is clearly not the room she has been finding, and she does not want their version to know about hers. She continues her own work. She sends a second package to Margaret Holt in Edinburgh. This one contains the blood quill documentation, the dormitory search records, and a precise account of the decree's procedural vulnerability. Written in Muggle legal language, she constructs by analogy from the Muggle law references in the Muggle Studies filing cabinet. February 1996. Umbridge discovers the defense group. Hermione watches the aftermath from the Ravenclaw table with her breakfast going cold in front of her. The Gryffindors are quiet with the particular quiet of people managing consequences. Harry Potter sits at the end of the table doing the thing she has catalogued across 5 years. Frightened, quiet, processing at a depth that his stillness conceals from anyone who isn't watching for it. Umbridge interviews students. She does not interview Hermione, because Hermione is not on any list connected to the group, because she was never in the group, because she has not done anything Umbridge can document. What Umbridge does not know, and what Hermione has spent 4 months ensuring, is that everything Umbridge herself has done is documented, down to the date, the time, the names, the manner. 43 pages in September, 112 pages now. Copies held by a Muggle solicitor in Edinburgh. Copies lodged with the Gringotts Legal Archive under a trust instrument Iron Shield processed in October. Copies sealed in a Gringotts vault accessible only upon a specific trigger condition. The trigger condition is Umbridge making one more decision she cannot legally justify. On March 3, 1996, Umbridge signs Educational Decree No. 26. Granting the Inquisitor authority to conduct formal investigative interviews using ministry-approved methods, a categorization broad enough to encompass truth serums, on students, without parental notification or independent legal oversight. Hermione reads it at 7:14 in the morning. She sends the owl to Edinburgh at 7:19. The message is 3 words. The ink dried. Margaret Holt releases the documentation package to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement on March 7th. It is delivered by Muggle Post to the Ministry's Muggle Correspondence address, a routing that places it, per standard interdepartmental protocol for cross-Muggle filings, on a desk in the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office, rather than the expected channels. Which means it is processed by Arthur Weasley, who reads the first 14 pages standing up and then sits down heavily and reads the remaining 98 without moving. The formal investigation opens March 11th. Umbridge is notified March 15th. The investigation is conducted not by Fudge's office, because the documentation package includes, in its appendix, 6 instances of correspondence between Umbridge and the Minister's office that constitute coordinated policy, which makes Fudge's office a subject of the investigation, rather than its administrator. Amelia Bones conducts it. She is thorough. She is, by institutional reputation, incapable of conducting anything else. Umbridge resigns on April 2nd, citing health. She does not cite the 112 pages. She does not mention the Muggle solicitor. She does not know about either. She knows only that something happened, and that it was precise, and that it left no fingerprints she can identify. Hermione is in the library when the news moves through the school. She hears it arrive, the noise-changing quality, the particular register of collective relief. She does not look up. She is reading the Bloodbound Compendium, which the Room of Requirement placed at her eye level 3 weeks ago. The chapter she is on is titled, in the plain declarative style of texts that have never needed to make themselves accessible, On Magical Networks and the Propagation of Bound Curses. She turns the page. At the bottom of the next page, in a margin note added by a previous reader in cramped brown ink, someone has written 2 words that stop her. Dark mark. She reads the margin note 4 times. She sits back. She looks at the ceiling of the Room of Requirement, which has configured itself today as a vaulted stone space, cold and exact, lit by something that is not quite firelight. In her notebook she writes, very carefully, beneath everything else she has written about magical networks and curse propagation and the structure of Voldemort's power, the mark is not a symbol. It is an architecture. And architectures have load-bearing walls. She underlines it once. She draws, beneath the line, a small and precise diagram, a network, nodes connected by lines. one node at the center larger than the rest. She labels the center node. She stares at what she has written. Then she turns to a fresh page and begins to plan. July 3rd, 1996. The Department of Mysteries. 11:22 in the evening. She should not be here. This is not a moral observation. It is a logistical one. She is 16, she has no ministry clearance. And the corridor she is standing in exists 3 levels below the atrium in a section of the building that does not appear on any floor plan she has been able to locate. Which means she found it by a different method. She followed the magical frequency she first identified in the Room of Requirements margin note. The frequency she has since measured, characterized, and learned to track the way a surveyor tracks magnetic north. The Department of Mysteries pulls. It has a specific gravitational quality she noticed first at age 14 when she stood in the atrium for a ministry hearing, connected to a Gringotts trust instrument, and felt something below her feet that she catalogued and set aside. She has since identified it as the ambient resonance of contained research, magic that is being studied rather than used, held in observation rather than released. The frequency of attention given sustained form. She found the entrance by following that frequency down 3 stairwells, and through a door that is not, technically, a door. It is a wall that becomes a door when approached by someone who already knows it should be there. This is, she has decided, the department's first filter. It does not ask for credentials. It asks for the specific quality of mind that arrives already certain. She walks through it. The circular room beyond has 12 doors, identical, rotating slowly. She has read the canonical description of this room in the ministry's own published architectural notes, a document she located in the Edinburgh Solicitor's Reference Library, filed under Historical Government Buildings, 1700, present, and she knows the doors rotate to prevent mapping. She stands in the center, counts her heartbeats to establish a baseline, and watches the rotation speed. It is not random. Nothing is random. Randomness is what you call a pattern before you have identified its variables. The rotation completes one full cycle in 47 seconds. The door she wants, she is looking for the death chamber, specifically for the veil, specifically for the frequency she has been tracking from a paper she found in the Room of Requirement titled On Veils, Thresholds. And the resonant signature of liminal magic is distinguishable from the others by a temperature differential she can feel on her left hand as it passes. 3 degrees colder than the adjacent doors. The veil leaks. She enters on the next pass. The death chamber is larger than she expected and smaller than it should be. The raised stone dais in its center is not dramatic. It is practical. Elevation for observation, the way a dissection table is elevated. The veil hanging from the arch is gray and moves despite the absence of any detectable air current, which is the first thing she writes down. Because a thing that moves without a mechanical cause is either producing its own movement or responding to a force she cannot yet measure. She does not approach it. She stands at the chamber's perimeter and takes readings. She has constructed a modified version of the runic detection array she has been running since 3rd year, smaller now, portable, inscribed on a strip of treated parchment she carries in her left sleeve. She holds it toward the veil at 3 different angles, reads the rune responses, records the numbers. The frequency she has been tracking is here, strong and close, the way a sound is strong and close when you finally enter the room it originates from. The veil resonates at a frequency she has no existing category for. Not dark magic, not light magic, not the ambient frequency of contained research she felt in the atrium. Something else, something that has the quality of a door rather than a room, a threshold rather than a location. Magic in a state of permanent potential. It is not doing anything. It is waiting to do something, in the specific way that a door waits, which is to say, it is doing exactly what it is supposed to do. She records everything. She spends 41 minutes in the death chamber, which is 39 minutes longer than she planned and 2 minutes shorter than she would have liked. She leaves because she hears footsteps on the stair. August 1996. Grimmauld Place. 2:15 in the afternoon. She has no reason to be here either. Technically she is here because she followed Harry Potter. which is something she has done 3 times in 6 years with increasing deliberateness and decreasing apology to herself about it. She does not follow him from affection. She follows him because he is, in her assessment, a variable whose behavior she cannot fully model from a distance, and variables you cannot model from a distance require closer observation. He has survived things that should have killed him. He has made decisions that should have been wrong and were not. He arrived at conclusions about Voldemort, about the Horcruxes. She heard him say the word to Dumbledore through a door that was not entirely closed, and she experienced something that was not surprise, but was adjacent to it. At roughly the same time she arrived at hers, from a completely different direction. 2 people solving the same problem from incompatible starting points who arrive at the same answer within the same month is not coincidence. It is either a property of the problem or a property of the people, and she is interested in determining which. She sits in the Grimmauld Place kitchen because Molly Weasley insists on feeding anyone within arm's reach. A tendency Hermione accepts without comment as a logistical convenience. She eats. She observes. Harry is across the table, working through a copy of Advanced Defensive Magic she recognizes from the Hogwarts library. She has read it, returned it, made notes. He reads the way she reads, actively. His lips not moving, but his attention moving. Something happening behind his eyes that isn't passive reception. He looks up. He finds her watching. He does not look away either. "You were at the ministry," he says. "In the death chamber." Last month. She considers 3 responses in the time it takes to draw a breath. She selects the accurate one. Yes. Why? Research. She holds his gaze. Why do you know that? He is quiet for a moment, in the way he is quiet when he is deciding how honest to be. She has catalogued this pause. It lasts between 2 and 4 seconds, and the answer that follows is always, in her experience, the truth. Not the complete truth, but the part of it he has decided to trust her with. "I felt something," he says. "In the veil." It felt like. He stops. "I can't describe it in a way that doesn't sound unstable." "Try," she says. Like someone I needed to find was just on the other side. His voice is flat and precise, like I'd been looking for something without knowing I was looking for it. And that was where it was. She writes this down. She writes it while he watches, which would be rude in most contexts, and is, here, a form of respect. She would not write it down if she did not think it was worth keeping. "The veil's frequency," she says. "In my analysis, the veil doesn't produce grief or longing. It reads what is already present in the person proximate to it and reflects it as directional signal. You may not be feeling someone on the other side. You may be feeling your own attachment to the dead. Returned to you as spatial information." He stares at her. "That," he says, "is either the coldest or the most useful thing anyone has ever said to me." "Probably both," she says. She caps her quill. "The Horcruxes. How many do you believe there are?" The pause is 3 seconds. 7, he says. Total soul pieces, including the original. So 6 objects. She opens her notebook to a page he cannot see from his angle. "I have confirmed 4. The diary, destroyed by you in 2nd year, though you didn't know what it was. The ring, in the Gaunt Shack. Dumbledore has it, damaged, possibly destroyed. The locket, taken from Grimmauld Place after Sirius's death, sold on by Mundungus Fletcher. I'm working on tracing where it went. The cup, Gringotts, Lestrange Vault. The diadem." She stops. He is looking at her with an expression she has not catalogued before and cannot immediately name. "You've been working on this since," he stops. "Since the missing pages," she says. "What missing pages?" "Magic Mostia Vial. 1st year. The excise chapter led me to Secrets of the Darkest Art, which I found in 5th year." She turns a page. The sealed reading room in the restricted section, one I'd identified in 2nd year but couldn't access, uses a ward anchored to Dumbledore's presence in the castle. When he was removed from Hogwarts and his magical signature left the building, the anchor weakened. Not enough to disappear, enough, for 3 minutes and 47 seconds, to yield. I had prepared for that possibility. I used the time. She looks at him. The diadem is the one I haven't located. I know it's in the castle. I have been sensing its frequency since third year. I have never been able to triangulate the source precisely enough to find it. The kitchen is very quiet. Outside, the gray London afternoon is making no particular effort. The window above the sink shows a section of the street, ordinary, unheroic. Harry says, very carefully, I think I know where it is. She looks up. There is a room, he says, on the 7th floor. Things people hide there, he pauses. I put something there in 5th year, something I didn't want. The room takes things you don't want, and keeps them. She closes her notebook. She opens it again to a fresh page. She writes, Room of Requirement, Concealment Configuration. Distinct from Research Configuration, the room presents differently to different users based on stated need. It has been collecting hidden objects since. She looks at him. Since when? How old is the castle? Thousands of years? He says it as a question. Thousands of years, she repeats. She writes, since the castle's founding. The diadem has been in the concealment room since Ravenclaw's daughter hid it there. Approximately 1,000 years. She looks at what she has written. She looks at the ceiling. She looks at Harry Potter, who found a different piece of the same answer by a completely different route, and she experiences something she cannot immediately categorize. Not admiration, not warmth, but a shift in her model of him. A recalibration of a variable she thought she understood. The unforgivable equation, she says, not to him, to the problem. Working aloud in the way she permits herself only when the listener is capable of following without requiring explanation, is not the curse. It is the arithmetic. 6 objects. 1 living anchor he did not intend, which means there is something else, something he made accidentally during the attack on your family, something we are not yet accounting for. 6 plus the unintended. 7 pieces of a soul that should have remained whole. Harry's face has gone very still. You know about the 7th piece, she says. I know about the scar, he says. Yes, she says. So do I. The silence between them is not empty. It is full of the specific weight of 2 people who have been solving the same equation in separate rooms and have just, for the first time, sat down at the same table. She uncaps her quill. She draws a clean line across the fresh page, dividing it in 2 columns. At the top of the left column she writes, what we know. At the top of the right column she writes, what must therefore be true. She slides the notebook to the center of the table. Tell me everything you know, she says, in the order you learned it. Omit nothing. He pulls the notebook toward him. He looks at it for a moment, then picks up her quill without asking, uncaps it, and begins to write. She watches his handwriting take shape on her page, different from hers, less architectural but precise in its own way, and she notes, in the part of her mind that never stops cataloging, that he has not asked her what she intends to do with what he tells her. He already knows she will use it well. She has not confirmed this. She does not need to. March 14, 1997, Ravenclaw Tower, 3:08 in the morning. She wakes from a dream she does not remember, with the absolute certainty that something in the castle has changed. Not a sound. Not a light. The astronomy chart above the common room ceiling is tracking normally. She can see it from the dormitory doorway, having crossed the room in 12 steps without turning on a lamp, because she mapped the furniture placement in first year and has not moved anything since. Orion is where Orion should be. The castle's ambient magical frequency, which she has been passively monitoring for so long that its baseline has become a kind of background hearing, is wrong, not different. Pressured, like the moment before a storm when the air stops moving. She dresses. She takes the runic detection array from her left sleeve pocket, where she keeps it always now, and holds it toward the window. The runes respond to something directional, northwest, upper castle, a frequency she has not encountered in this location before. She has encountered it elsewhere. Once, in the death chamber from the veil. Once in the room of requirement. From the research aisle the room placed at her eye level. 3 times in Ravenclaw Tower itself, in the 1st, 3rd, and 5th years, in passing, never strong enough to locate precisely. Strong enough now. Considerably stronger. The diadem, she writes in her notebook, still standing, using the window light, is active. She finds Harry Potter in the corridor outside the 7th floor bathroom at 3:31 in the morning. He is leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, wearing the specific expression of someone who has been waiting and expected to be kept waiting. "You felt it, too," she says. "Different way," he says. "My scar." He touches his forehead briefly. It's not pain. It's more like a direction. Something he wants. She notes this without writing it down, because her hands need to be free. He's accessing a Horcrux remotely? Voldemort can feel them? I think so. I think he just realized something is wrong with one of them. Harry's voice is level in the way she has come to understand means the opposite of calm. The ring. Dumbledore destroyed it in December. I think he only just felt the absence. She calculates the delay. 3 months between the ring's destruction and Voldemort's awareness of it. The connection between Voldemort and his Horcruxes is not real time. It attenuates with distance, with the depth of his current embodiment, with the degree of his attention. 3 months of latency means he has not been actively monitoring the objects. He trusts them. He considers them safe. He'll check the others, she says. Yes. How much time do we have before he checks the one in this castle? Harry is quiet for 2 seconds. I don't know. Less than we did. She turns toward the tapestry of Barnabas the Barmy. She walks past it 3 times, thinking not of what she wants to find but of what she needs to do. Which is the formulation she has learned by trial across 6 visits, the one that opens the concealment configuration rather than the research one. The door appears. The room of requirement in its concealment configuration is vast and cold, and has the quality of a place that does not entirely believe in itself. Mountains of hidden objects rise from its floor in formations that are geological in their scale, centuries of things people needed gone, accumulated with the indifferent patience of a room that never fills, because it simply extends. The frequency is stronger here, much stronger. She holds the detection array outward and turns slowly, reading the rune responses, establishing a gradient, northwest of her current position. Elevated, the objects are stacked to ceiling height in places and the diadem is somewhere above her. Harry casts a light charm and holds it up. The room's interior is revealed in sections. Towers of broken furniture, damaged spell equipment, objects she cannot name and does not look at for long enough to be distracted by. The light catches something metallic above a stack of battered cabinets 30 feet to her left. There, she says. Getting to it requires climbing. Harry goes first. Practically, he is better at this than she is. The physical improvisation of it, finding handholds in the stacked debris with the ease of someone who grew up solving physical problems without resources. She follows. Slower, more deliberate, testing each surface before committing weight. The diadem is resting on a broken music stand at a height of roughly 15 feet. It is smaller than she imagined. Silver gray, set with a single sapphire, engraved around the circlet with words she can read from 3 feet away. Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure. She reads it. She reads it again. She is close enough now that the detection array is responding continuously, the runes lit and held, and she can feel the diadem's frequency without the instrument. A low, sustained pressure at the base of her skull. Not painful, not pleasant, precise. The pressure has a quality she has felt before, in the research configuration of this room, in the library late at night. In the 40 minutes of sleep she allows herself after long study sessions. The quality of a mind being recognized. The array gives her something else as well, an estimated creation date for the Horcrux. She reads the figure twice. Mid-20th century. 50 years at most. She had assumed, from her earlier research, the Grey Lady's documented history, the founding era provenance of the diadem itself, that it had been concealed here for centuries, that Helena Ravenclaw had hidden it in this room when she fled. The array's reading contradicts this. The diadem is ancient. The Horcrux is recent, which means whoever made it had already found the diadem elsewhere and brought it here. The soul fracture is Riddle's work, done during his years at Hogwarts. She corrects her timeline without pause. Helena hid the diadem in Albania. Riddle found it and hid it here. She had been wrong. She revises the conclusion and moves on, because she did not come here to confirm her existing knowledge. She came here to destroy what she found. She reaches out. She stops with her fingers 1 inch from the metal. It is not the Horcrux that gives her pause. She can feel the soul fragment inside it. Cold, coherent, old, recognizably dark in the way that the ring and the diary were dark. A presence folded into the object like something compressed past its natural volume. She has prepared for this. She has the destruction methodology already selected. Fiendfire, the only option available here without basilisk venom, and she has spent 4 months learning the control parameters of Fiendfire from a text in the room's research configuration, which she chose to trust, because the alternative was not learning it. What gives her pause is the diadem itself. The object, separate from the corruption inside it. Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem, confirmed lost for 1,000 years. Confirmed, by multiple historical sources she has read in full, to grant the wearer enhanced wisdom and cognitive clarity, a magical amplification of existing intellectual capacity. The mechanism she has theorized involves a resonance effect between the wearer's native magical frequency and a trapped frequency inscribed into the silver at forging. She is standing in front of the only object in the known world specifically designed to make a mind like hers work better. And she is going to set it on fire. The 3 seconds that follow are the most honest 3 seconds of her life. She does not pretend she is not tempted. She is not built for that kind of self-deception, which is the one advantage of having catalogued her own psychology as thoroughly as she has catalogued everything else. She knows what she wants. She wants it clearly, and without confusion she wants to put the diadem on and find out what she becomes, when every connection she already makes faster than everyone around her becomes faster still. She wants to know what the room looked like, from Rowena Ravenclaw's perspective. She wants to know if there are questions she is currently incapable of formulating that the diadem would let her see. She wants, and this is the most honest part, the part she will not write in her notebook, but also will not hide from herself. She wants to know if she is already working at her limit, or if there is more. She is 16. She has never worked at her limit. She does not know where it is. This is the one variable in her assessment of herself she cannot measure, and it is the one that matters most. The diadem would tell her. She keeps her fingers 1 inch from the metal. She performs the arithmetic. If she puts it on, immediate gain, unknown magnitude. Compromise unknown. She has read no reliable study of the diadem's effects on a host after extended wear, and the only historical account she trusts describes a woman who wore it for 3 months and described the removal as losing a room she had lived in. Addiction or dependency of the cognitive variety, and beneath all of it, the Horcrux, folded inside, which would be proximate to her mind in a way that basilisk venom and fiendfire are not proximate to anything they touch. Tom Riddle's soul fragment. In her head, pressing against the inside of her skull the way it pressed against the inside of the diary, the way it drained Ginny Weasley of herself from the inside, slowly, exactly, the way water drains through the smallest crack. She thinks about Ginny Weasley for the first time in a long time, the second-year girl with the exhausted eyes, the girl she did not know but whose situation she understood the mechanics of, and found, quietly, beneath the analytical distance, intolerable. She thinks about herself, about what she has built since first year, the system, the documentation, the methodology, the slow, precise accumulation of understanding. She thinks about the notebook in her sleeve, and the folder in the Edinburgh solicitor's office, and the Gringotts archive, and the research aisle in this very room, and she thinks about what all of it was for, which is not enhanced capacity, but applied capacity. The difference between a larger instrument and a better aimed one. She has been aiming at this room for 6 years. She is not going to compromise the instrument now, because the target is within reach. She withdraws her hand. "Don't touch it," she says to Harry, who has not moved toward it, and who she knew was not going to, but who deserves to hear her say it anyway because he has earned the explanation, not because of the Horcrux specifically. Because the diadem is its own trap. Ravenclaw's magic and Riddle's magic are layered. The soul fragment used the diadem's native resonance as camouflage. If you are susceptible to one, the other has access. Are you susceptible to it? He asks. The question is simple and direct, and she respects him for asking it this plainly. Yes, she says. I was. For approximately 3 seconds. He looks at her for a moment. Something in his expression shifts, not surprise, something more like recognition. The same recalibration she felt in the Grimmauld Place kitchen. He nods once. She turns back to the diadem. She uncaps her quill. She records the runic signature of the soul fragment in complete detail, frequency, coherence index, estimated age of the fracture. Because even this, even a piece of Voldemort's soul at 15 feet, is data she does not intend to waste. Then she puts the notebook away. Stand back, she says. Fiendfire requires a clear exit line. I'll take the east path. You take the west. When I cast, we move immediately. You're certain about the control parameters? I have been practicing the containment sequence for 4 months. She pauses. Because she owes him precision here, not reassurance. Fiendfire is not safely controllable by most practitioners who have attempted it. I believe I have the parameters, but I cannot be certain until I cast it. Those are not the same thing, and you should know the difference before I proceed. No, he says. They're not. She raises her wand. The Fiendfire takes form. Serpentine, coherent, obedient to the containment runes she has already drawn on the floor in a circle around the music stand, a boundary she spent 11 minutes establishing before climbing, because she knew what she was going to have to do when she arrived. The fire moves to the diadem with the purposeful quality of a heat-seeking thing. The soul fragment burns. It burns with a sound she has heard once before, in her research, in a theoretical account she read and marked as reliable. A sound like an argument cut off mid-sentence, something with opinions that no longer has a mouth. The diadem melts. The sapphire cracks. The silver loses its particular quality. The resonance frequency she has been tracking for 3 years flickers twice and goes dark. She contains the Fiendfire in 4 seconds. Extinguishes it in 7. Her hands are steady. She does not let herself examine what it costs to make them stay that way. The detection array reads clean. She climbs down. Harry climbs down beside her. They walk through the room in silence, navigating the debris, back toward the door and the corridor and the cold ordinary darkness of the castle at 4 a.m. At the door, Harry stops. 3 seconds, he says. She knows what he is asking. 3 seconds is a long time, she says, to know exactly what you want and choose something else. She opens the door. She walks through it. Behind her, the room of requirement closes with the soft finality of a book being shut by someone who intends to return. In her notebook, walking, she writes nothing. Some things she will remember without writing them down. September 1st, 1997. Hogwarts, 9:14 in the morning. She does not go back. This requires a decision she makes once, in August. Sitting at the desk in her parents' house in Oxford with a train ticket to London on one side and her notebook open on the other. The decision takes 11 minutes, which is 10 minutes longer than most of her decisions, and 1 minute shorter than she thinks it should. She is 17. She has been preparing for a specific problem for 6 years. The problem has entered its final configuration. Going back to Hogwarts would mean spending 9 months in a building that Death Eaters now control, under teachers whose ideological compliance has been verified by Voldemort personally, studying a curriculum redesigned to produce submission rather than understanding. She can learn more in 11 months outside the building than inside it. She writes this in her notebook. She reads it back. She adds, "This is not abandonment. This is resource allocation." She caps her quill. She puts the train ticket in a drawer. She does not take it out again. The first thing she does is find the locket. She has known since 6th year that it was taken from Grimmauld Place after Sirius's death, Mundungus Fletcher, whose movements she tracked through a detection array she positioned near the Order's known meeting locations, lifting objects from the Black Estate in the weeks after Sirius fell. Fletcher sold it. She establishes the buyer through 4 conversations she conducts in Diagon Alley in the first week of September, wearing glamour charms she designed herself, a different one each day, none of which involve polyjuice because she considers polyjuice a crude solution. The buyer is Dolores Umbridge. She sits with this information for 30 seconds, which is how long it takes to appreciate the specific irony of it, and then set the appreciation aside as irrelevant. She takes the locket from Umbridge's office on September 14th, between 11 and 11:42, during a ministry function that takes Umbridge to the 6th floor. She enters through a window she unlocked 2 weeks prior during a ministry public access day, using a ward reversal technique she developed from the theoretical framework in the Bloodbound Compendium. The ward closes again on exit. The window relocks. She is in and out in 42 minutes, 30 of which are spent documenting the contents of Umbridge's files. Because she is there, and the information is available, and she does not waste available information. The locket goes into a lead-lined pouch she made in August, designed to suppress the soul fragment's ambient frequency. She has been refining the destruction technique across 9 testing iterations. She is not yet satisfied with the control parameters. She continues. October 1997. She is living from a tent. This is a logistical condition she has prepared for and continues to find inefficient in specific ways she is actively addressing. She has extended the interior of the tent using a space modification charm she derived from the Bloodbound Compendium section on spatial compression, giving herself a working area 3 times the tent's exterior dimensions. She has warded the perimeter with a rotating sequence of detection, deflection, and concealment charms on a 4-hour cycle, which means she cannot sleep for more than 3 hours and 50 minutes at any one stretch without resetting the outer ward. She sleeps in segments. She works in segments. She has a schedule written on a piece of card she has laminated with a stiffening charm and pinned to the tent's central support beam. The schedule has no gaps. She is not with Harry and Ron. This is a decision she made in August alongside the train ticket decision, and for related reasons, Harry's movements attract attention of a quality and quantity she cannot work effectively within. And Ron's departure from the group and any extended difficulty. She has modeled this across several projected scenarios, and the model keeps producing the same result, is a logistical liability she cannot plan around. She has told Harry, in a letter delivered by a magical contact she will not identify here, that she is working on the network problem from outside. She has told him what she has found about the locket. She has told him she is alive. She has not told him where she is, because if she is found, she does not want the connection traced. He wrote back in 3 lines, I know. Be careful. We're looking for the others. She appreciated the economy of it. November 1997. The network problem. She has been working on it since the margin note in the Bloodbound Compendium, since the words dark mark in brown ink, cramped and precise, written by a previous reader whose identity she has spent 3 months attempting to establish without success. She has concluded the annotation was made by a researcher in the Department of Mysteries, possibly in the 1960s, based on the phrasing's syntactical similarity to 3 internal ministry research documents she photographed during the Umbridge office visit. In her theoretical framework, and she is careful to hold it as framework rather than fact, because she has 3 pieces of indirect evidence and 1 primary source of uncertain provenance, the dark mark is a bound curse of the network variety. The framework has 4 components. First, she theorizes that the mark is not decorative and not merely a summoning mechanism. It is, in her analysis, a living magical connection between Voldemort and each bearer, running in both directions. It allows him to call them. It may allow him, she hypothesizes, to draw ambient magical energy from them passively, a supplementary power source. So attenuated across individual bearers that no single Death Eater would register the drain, but potentially significant in aggregate. Second, she theorizes that the connections between marks do not run individually from each bearer to a central node. They run as a network, each mark connected laterally to adjacent marks, all of them connected to Voldemort as the anchor point. She infers this from 3 pieces of indirect evidence: the the simultaneous response of all Death Eaters to a single summons, the propagation speed she estimates from observed response times which exceeds what isolated individual connections could support, and a passage in a 1974 Department of Mysteries internal memo that describes the mark as exhibiting what it terms lateral magical resonance between bearers in proximity. Lateral resonance suggests a peer-to-peer architecture, not hub and spoke. She holds this as her working hypothesis. She has not confirmed it. She continues to look for confirming or disconfirming evidence. Third, if her hypothesis is correct, distributed networks of this kind have specific vulnerabilities that centralized architectures do not. Attacking the anchor in a hub-and-spoke system collapses the network. Attacking the anchor in a distributed network degrades it, but does not end it. The correct intervention point, in her theoretical model, is the propagation protocol, the rule by which the signal moves between nodes. She writes this in her notebook and reads it back and permits herself the specific satisfaction of a framework with internal consistency, which is the satisfaction she trusts most because it does not depend on external validation. Fourth, in her analysis, the propagation protocol of the dark mark network is the binding magic that adheres each mark to its bearer. She has traced this magic, tentatively, to a blood-binding technique that appears in a grimoire predating the ministry's founding, the same text the blood-bound compendium cites as its primary source. The binding, she theorizes, creates a resonant loop between the mark's magical signature and the bearer's biological magical frequency. The two frequencies lock. The connection holds as long as both are present and compatible. If the binding can be inverted, if the bearer's frequency can be forced to push against the mark's signature rather than align with it, the connection inverts. The energy flowing through the network reverses direction, for the duration of the inversion, in her theoretical model. Every Death Eater in the network loses the ability to cast. She has worked out the mechanism in theory. She has spent 3 months working out the mechanism in practice, which is more difficult and more interesting, because theory does not have edge cases, and practice has nothing but. December 1997. The locket. She destroys it on a Tuesday. Not because Tuesday has significance, but because her testing protocol reaches completion on a Tuesday, and she does not defer completion of a protocol for symbolic reasons. The technique she has refined is one she has no name for in any existing text, she calls it. In her notes, annum solve, a term she constructed for precision rather than precedent. It is her own invention, assembled from first principles derived from 3 years of Veil research, a dissolution sequence she built by theoretical inversion of soul-binding mechanics and refined across 9 iterations of controlled testing on simulated targets of increasing complexity. She cannot verify her methodology against any documented precedent because the methodology has no documented precedent. What she has instead is a control parameter she has tested sufficiently to consider reliable, and the understanding that reliable and certain are not the same word. She places the locket on the flat stone she uses as a working surface. She draws the containment circle in rune sequence around it, the same circle she used for the diadem's fiendfire, modified for a different delivery mechanism. She opens the locket using a blood key technique from the blood-bound compendium, 1 drop of blood on the clasp. The blood's magical signature compelling the lock not through lineage, but through priority of contact. A warded object, in her experience, recognizes the most recent magical presence to have handled it with deliberate intent. She has handled this locket with more deliberate intent than anyone since Voldemort sealed it. The clasp opens. The soul fragment inside becomes aware of her in the specific way that soul fragments become aware of things. Not consciousness exactly, but orientation. A turning toward. She feels it push. She pushes back. The annum solve sequence takes 8 minutes, 4 minutes longer than her best practice iteration, because the locket's fragment is more coherent than she anticipated, older, more compressed, more convinced of itself. It produces no illusions. It does not show her things she fears. It simply resists, with the concentrated obstinacy of something that has been a fragment for 50 years and has organized itself around the single intention of persisting. She sustains the sequence. She does not increase the power output. She maintains the pressure at exactly the level her calculations indicate will work, and she waits. Because she has learned across 9 iterations that impatience is the variable most likely to cause a controlled dissolution to become an uncontrolled one. At the 8-minute mark, the fragment loses coherence. At 8 minutes and 14 seconds, it dissolves. The locket goes cold. The soul frequency she has been tracking for months goes absent. The way a sound goes absent when you finally identify its source and remove it. She records the time, the duration, the specific sequence modifications that address the fragment's coherence. She adds this to the technical documentation she has been building alongside the theoretical framework, a document now 47 pages long that she thinks of, privately, as a manual for destroying the things Voldemort was most certain were indestructible. She folds the document. She puts it in the inner pocket of her robes. Outside the tent, the winter landscape is white and motionless and offers no opinion. She resets the outer ward. She checks the schedule on the central beam. She consults her notebook. 4 Horcruxes destroyed. The diary, the ring, the diadem, the locket. 2 objects remaining. The cup, which she believes is in Gringotts, and Nagini. She has a plan for both and a timeline for each. And one she cannot approach directly. The one she will not write about in any document stored outside the tent. The one that walks around Hogwarts with a lightning bolt scar and has survived 6 years of Voldemort's attempts to kill him, not because of luck, but because of the specific magical mechanism she identified in the Death Chamber, in the veil's resonant frequency, in the nature of Lily Potter's sacrifice, the one that Harry does not know about yet. She writes this problem at the top of a fresh page, alone, with nothing else on the page, the way she writes the most important things. She looks at it for a long time. Then she begins. May 2nd, 1998, Hogwarts, 12:47 in the morning. She arrives before the battle. This is not an accident. She has been monitoring the castle's magical frequency from a distance of 6 miles for 11 days, tracking the specific pressure pattern that precedes large-scale ward activation. The castle's ancient defenses drawing on the ley lines beneath the grounds, a process that takes hours and produces a frequency signature she mapped in 5th year and has not forgotten. When the signature began its activation curve at 9 in the evening, she calculated the timeline, packed her tent into a moleskin pouch, and began walking. She arrives at the Hogwarts boundary at 12:47, which gives her between 2 and 4 hours before the Death Eater army reaches the grounds. Based on the mobilization speed she has estimated from 3 weeks of tracking their movements through a ward detection array she distributed across a 12-mile radius in the last days of April. Small arrays, inscribed on stones, placed during night walks, each one reporting back to a central receiver she built from a design in the Department of Mysteries research she photographed 18 months ago. The arrays have been reading escalating movement since sundown. Convergence pattern. They are coming here. She crosses the boundary. The castle's wards recognize her, not by name, but by frequency, the Ravenclaw resonance she has carried since the sorting, amplified by 7 years of study into something the castle's own diagnostic systems can apparently distinguish from background magical noise. She feels the ward's acknowledgement as a brief pressure on her sternum, the same pressure she felt the first night she answered the Eagle's riddle, and she keeps walking. She finds Harry in the room of requirement at 1:15. He is not surprised to see her. He takes her in with one look, the tent pouch, the detection array still active on her left wrist, the specific quality of stillness she carries when every contingency plan is loaded, and she is waiting for the variable that tells her which one to execute, and he nods, once, the way he nods when he has already incorporated her presence into his calculations. The cup, he says. Destroyed, she says. March, Gringotts. Through the refinement vault during the quarterly audit, the goblin's attention on the inventory. I had 11 minutes, of which 4 were spent locating the cup within the Lestrange vault's secondary chamber, because the thief's downfall and the multiplication curses don't stop working simply because you've planned around them. I used the frequency signature to find it. She does not elaborate on how close the margin was. The 11 minutes were enough. Barely, that leaves 1. Nagini, yes, she opens her notebook. I have a plan for Nagini. It requires proximity and approximately 90 seconds of uninterrupted casting. I need her within 15 feet, and I need whatever is happening around me to stop happening for 90 seconds. I am aware that those are not simple requirements during a battle. I'll get you the 90 seconds, he says. I know, she says. She looks at him. He looks at her. This is, she understands, the complete version of every half-conversation they have been having since the Grimmauld Place kitchen, since the Triwizard year, since she wrote note beside his name for the first time in the Great Hall in 1994, and did not know yet what she was noting toward. She is noting toward this room, this hour, this problem. There is something else, she says. He waits. She has spent 4 months determining how to say this. She has written 7 versions in her notebook, each one more precise than the last, and she has crossed all 7 out. Because the problem with precision in this case is that precision does not make the information less catastrophic. It only makes the delivery cleaner, and clean delivery is insufficient. The 7th Horcrux, she says. Voldemort made it by accident, during the attack on your family in Godric's Hollow. The rebounded killing curse fractured his soul at a moment when you were the proximate magical object. A fragment attached. She holds his gaze. It has been in your scar since you were 15 months old. The room of requirement is very quiet. Around them, students are preparing. She can hear it through the walls, the movement, the low voices. But in this specific pocket of space, the quiet is complete. Harry looks at her. His face does the thing it does when he is frightened. And then it does something she has not catalogued before. A movement through the fear. A settling. The way a gyroscope settles when the spinning stabilizes. I have to die, he says. You have to approach death, she says. There is a mechanism. Your mother's sacrifice created a protective counter-enchantment that inverts lethal magic directed at you. If Voldemort performs Avada Kedavra on you, the curse kills the Horcrux. The fragment attached to your scar, not you. Your body's own magic, sustained by the counter-enchantment, keeps the biological connection intact. She pauses. The fragment dies. You survive. You're certain. I am certain of the theory. I am certain of the mechanism. I am not certain of the outcome because I have never watched it happen. She holds his gaze. But the arithmetic is clean. I have checked it 47 times. He nods. Slowly, the way he nods when he has made a decision rather than accepted information. After, he says. After I do that. You'll be ready. Yes, she says. Then let's finish it. The battle begins at 2 a.m. with a sound she feels before she hears. A deep concussive pulse as the Death Eater force breaches the outer ward boundary and the castle's defenses respond. Stone and ancient magic, and 700 years of accumulated protective intent engaging all at once. She is in the entrance hall. The castle shakes. Dust falls from the ceiling in a fine, continuous sifting. She moves. Her role in the battle is not the role anyone has assigned her. Because no one has assigned her anything, she arrived uninvited, unaffiliated, operating outside every organizational structure the Order of the Phoenix has built. This is by design. Organizations have command structures, and command structures have bottlenecks, and bottlenecks produce delays, and she does not have time for delays tonight. She works the perimeter. She has the ward map she built in 5th year, updated with the 7 years of subsequent monitoring, and she uses it to identify the points where the Death Eater force is concentrating pressure, not to engage them directly, but to understand the attack's architecture. They are pushing hardest at the east wall, which means the command intention is to breach there, which means the diversionary pressure elsewhere is thinner, which means the students defending the north corridor are facing lighter resistance than they know. She sends a Patronus to the north corridor group with updated information. Her Patronus is an otter, which she finds, in passing, to be an odd choice for a mind that operates the way hers does, and which she has decided over 7 years simply represents the part of herself she does not show in notebooks. The otter delivers its message. She moves on. Nagini is in the Great Hall at 3:47 in the morning. She knows this because she has been tracking the snake's magical frequency, the Horcrux's specific signature, now the last one remaining. For 2 hours, the detection array on her wrist, reading it as a directional signal, she follows through corridors and past combatants and through the battle's chaos, with the focused attention of someone who has learned to work in difficult conditions by practicing in difficult conditions. The Great Hall is not empty. It is the opposite of empty, wounded on the floor, fighters moving through, spells crossing the space in both directions, the long tables pushed aside to create fighting lanes and triage areas simultaneously. Nagini is in the center of the hall, moving freely. A 12-foot Horcrux in a battle where no one is prioritizing it because they do not know what it is. She knows what it is. She begins clearing her path. Not by fighting, she does not have the angle or the cover for sustained combat casting. She moves along the hall's eastern wall, using the support columns as cover, reaching the position she needs, 15 feet from the snake. Clear sightline. Stone wall behind her, no combatants in her immediate forward arc. She looks for Harry. He is across the hall, 40 feet away, and he is looking at her. He has been looking at her. He tracked her path from the entrance, she realizes, has known where she was going, and has been working his own path toward an intersecting position. Not to help her reach Nagini, but to ensure that when she begins the casting sequence, the 90 seconds of uninterrupted work she requires do not get interrupted. He finds her eyes. He raises his wand in a half gesture, not a spell, an acknowledgement. She nods once. He turns and does something she has never seen anyone do in combat, which is move into the center of a battle with the specific intention of being the loudest, most visible, most magnetically chaotic thing in the room. He casts a protean-linked set of signal flares she recognizes from the Da's fifth-year work, 6 colors in sequence, each one summoning a different group of defenders to a different position, simultaneously reorganizing the entire hall's combat geometry in 30 seconds. Every Death Eater in the room recalibrates toward the movement. Every defender recalibrates toward the signal. The space around her goes quiet. She casts. The Animal Salve sequence for a living Horcrux host. Her theoretical extension of the object-based technique she developed across 9 practice iterations. Takes 63 seconds in her calculations. She has never applied it to a living animal. The modification she built accounts for the difference between object and organism. The soul fragment in a living host is less compressed, more distributed through the carrier's biological field, which means the dissolution sequence must account for lateral spread rather than central compression. She has no documented precedent for this modification. She has 6 weeks of theoretical preparation, and the understanding that no one has attempted this before, and she is attempting it now. She accounts for it. She has been accounting for it for 6 weeks. Nagini turns toward her at second 4. The snake's awareness of the casting is immediate. The soul fragment responds to dissolution magic the way all the fragments have responded, with orientation and then with resistance. Nagini rears. Her scales contract. The dark magic inside her gathers toward the point of external pressure, which is Hermione's extended wand, the sequence moving outward from it in a frequency she has learned to sustain, through practice the way musicians sustain a note, not by increasing effort, but by maintaining evenness. Second 19. The snake strikes. She steps left, precisely, the movement calculated from Nagini's body position at second 14 when the strike angle became apparent. The fangs clear her right shoulder by 4 inches. She does not break the sequence. Second 37. Nagini strikes again. She steps right. The sequence does not break. Second 51. The soul fragment begins to lose coherence. She can feel it in the resistance, the quality of it changing from solid to granular, from continuous to intermittent, the way a signal loses integrity as its source degrades. Second 63. The fragment dissolves. Nagini stops moving. The snake is alive, she can see the breathing, the residual biological function of an organism that has just had something removed from it that was not its own. Nagini coils slowly, disoriented, her head lowering to the floor. Hermione holds the detection array toward her. The runes do not respond. No soul frequency. No dark resonance. Clean. 6 Horcruxes destroyed. The 7th walks toward Voldemort right now, she knows, on Harry's deliberate decision, carrying the last fragment in his scar toward the man who put it there. She looks at the array. She looks at her notebook. She does not write anything because there is nothing yet to record. The equation is not complete until the outcome is known. And the outcome will not be known until Harry either comes back through the forest's edge or does not. She waits. She is not good at waiting. She has never been good at it. She stands at the Great Hall's entrance, detection array active, notebook in her left hand, quill in her right, and she waits in the way she does everything, completely, without leaving any of herself outside it. The castle around her continues its battle. Somewhere in the distance, stone collapses. Someone is shouting in the corridor to her left. The eastern wall takes another hit, and the window nearest her loses 3 panes in a clean cascade, glass falling straight down in the windless early morning. She notes the time. 4:19. She waits. At 4:31, something changes in the magical field. A pressure she recognizes from the death chamber, from the veil, from every moment she has spent measuring the frequency of things at the edge of being. The pressure builds, holds, then releases, the way a door releases when the latch clears. A single clean mechanical transition from one state to another. The detection array on her wrist goes completely dark. Every rune simultaneously inactive. No dark frequency within range. No soul fragment. No Horcrux signature anywhere in the detectable field. She looks at the array for 3 seconds. She writes in her notebook, 4:31 a.m. All frequencies clear. The equation is resolved. She underlines it. She caps her quill. She looks at the forest. She begins walking toward it. May 2nd, 1998. The edge of the Forbidden Forest. 4:44 in the morning. Harry Potter walks out of the trees. She has been standing at the forest's edge for 13 minutes with her detection array active, and her notebook open, and nothing written on the current page, which is the longest she has stood with an open notebook, and nothing written in 7 years. The page has remained blank, because she did not know what she was going to write until she knew the outcome, and the outcome was a variable she could model, but could not determine. And she has spent 13 minutes in the specific discomfort of a mind that has run out of things to calculate and must simply wait for reality to report back. He is walking. This is the first data point. He is upright, his gait is even. There is no visible injury beyond what the night has already given him. He emerges from the tree line and stops when he sees her, and something in his face rearranges. Not surprise, the opposite of surprise. The expression of someone who looked for a specific thing and found it exactly where the looking had been aimed. She holds up the detection array. The runes are dark. She turns it so he can see. He looks at it. He nods. The scar, she says. He touches his forehead with 2 fingers. Gone. Not the mark, the weight of it. He drops his hand. You'd know the difference better than I would. The fragment's dissolution would feel like depressurization, she says, like a room that was slightly wrong becoming correct. Yes, he says. Exactly that. She writes on the blank page, fragment confirmed dissolved. Host intact. Mechanism performed as theorist. She reads it back. She draws a single line beneath it. Below the line she writes nothing else, because below the line is where the next problem would begin, and she is going to allow herself, for the duration of the walk back to the castle, to exist in a moment that does not yet contain a next problem. They walk back together in the early dark, and neither of them speaks. And this is the most complete conversation they have ever had. May 2nd, 1998. The Great Hall. 6:03 in the morning. Voldemort falls at 5:52. She is not present for the final confrontation. She is in the antechamber off the Great Hall's east side, which has been converted to a medical staging area, applying a bone-knitting charm to Anthony Goldstein's left forearm with the focused efficiency she brings to every practical task. Anthony is watching her with the expression he has worn since second year when he first noticed the direction her research was going. A mixture of unease and something that is not quite gratitude but is adjacent to it. You knew, he says, about all of it. How long? The Horcruxes specifically, since first year in principle, second year in mechanism. She applies the final stage of the charm. Hold still. And you didn't. He stops. Reconsiders, you couldn't have told anyone. I could have told Dumbledore in second year, she says. I chose not to, because his response would have been to manage the information rather than act on it, and managed information produces managed solutions, and managed solutions in this case would have meant Harry in a more controlled version of the same war rather than a resolved one. She checks the bone alignment. Acceptable. The war needed to end, not be managed. Anthony is quiet for a moment. You made that decision at 12. The decision had better supporting evidence by 6th year, she says. I revisited it annually. She moves to the next patient. The battle's final accounting takes 4 days. She participates in none of the celebration and all of the documentation. There are 47 wounded who require non-standard treatment, curse damage, hex sequelae. 3 cases of partial transfiguration requiring specialist reversal she performs herself, because the available healers were trained in standard methodology, and 2 of the 3 cases are not standard. There are 19 dead. She records each name in her notebook, with the date and the specific magical cause and the location, because these are facts that should be preserved with precision. And precision is what she has to offer. On the 3rd day, Kingsley Shacklebolt, who has been appointed interim minister, sends a formal request for a meeting. She reads the request, notes its bureaucratic structure. He is being careful, treating her as something that requires diplomatic handling, which she finds both accurate and slightly funny, and sends a reply agreeing to Tuesday at 10. She spends the intervening time finishing the technical documentation. The 47-page Horcrux Destruction Manual becomes 63 pages, with the addition of the Nagini methodology and the Scar Fragment theoretical framework. She adds a 12-page appendix on the Darkmark network architecture and the inversion technique she has been developing. Clearly labeled throughout as theoretical framework requiring further verification, rather than established fact, including the complete rune sequence and the specific frequency parameters required for the propagation signal. She writes it the way she writes everything, assuming the reader is intelligent, omitting nothing that is necessary, including nothing that is not. She makes 3 copies. 1 goes to Gringotts, 1 goes to the Department of Mysteries. 1 she keeps. She does not publish it. Some instruments are too precise for general distribution. The ministry can archive it. Future researchers with sufficient methodology will find it. Tuesday, Shacklebolt's temporary office in the ministry's undamaged West Wing. He is a large man with the specific stillness of someone who has spent years in roles that required reading rooms while appearing not to. He reads people the way she reads rooms, efficiently, without announcing it. She respects this. We would like to offer you a position, he says. Several positions, in fact. The choices are, I've read the ministry's organizational structure, she says. I know what you're going to offer. Auror training, fast-tracked, senior research position in the DM-lay, possibly a junior unspeakable post if you're feeling expansive. She holds his gaze. I'm declining all 3. He is quiet for a moment. What would you accept? I want to speak to whoever leads the Department of Mysteries, she says. Not a junior unspeakable. The head. I want 1 meeting, 40 minutes, and I want to bring my documentation. With what objective? With the objective of determining whether they are doing work worth doing, she says. If they are, I'll tell them what I know, and we'll discuss terms. If they aren't, I'll build the institution that should exist in its place. Shacklebolt looks at her for a long moment. He has the look of a man recalibrating a prior assessment, which she finds gratifying in the specific way she finds all accurate recalibration gratifying. You're 18, he says. I'm aware, she says. That's a description, not an argument. He sends the owl to the Department of Mysteries that afternoon. 3 weeks later. The Department of Mysteries. 10:00 in the morning. The unspeakable who meets her is called. As far as she can determine, nothing. She asks for a name at the start of the meeting, and is told, with genuine rather than performed apology, that the role does not use them internally. She accepts this as an interesting institutional choice, rather than an obstacle, and moves on. They sit in a circular room she has not been in before, not the death chamber, not the circular antechamber with the 12 rotating doors, but a smaller space, plain stone, 2 chairs, a table between them, a lamp above that runs on magical frequency rather than fire. The unspeakable reads her documentation for 41 minutes without speaking. She sits across the table and makes notes on 3 separate problems she has been running in parallel, because the time is available and she does not waste available time. At the 41-minute mark, the unspeakable sets the documentation down and looks at her for 30 seconds. When, they say, can you start? She considers the question. She has a list of conditions: working autonomy, archive access, the right to publish redacted versions of findings she judges suitable for external circulation, a private laboratory on the frequency-sealed subfloor she identified on her first unauthorized visit. She presents the list. The unspeakable reads it. Yes to all of it, they say, which is not the response she planned for. And she notes this as a data point about the institution. It moves faster than its exterior suggests. Then I can start, she says on Monday. 7 years later. Department of Mysteries. September 14, 2005, she is 25 years old, and she is the youngest head the department has had in its history. A fact that is noted in the ministry's internal record, and nowhere else. Because the department does not maintain a public profile, and she has actively discouraged the development of one. Her office is not an office. It is the third subfloor laboratory she claimed in her second year at the department, expanded by spatial compression to 4 times its original volume, lined on 3 walls with the research materials she has accumulated across 7 years of work, that has taken her considerably further than she expected, and not nearly as far as she intends. She has published 7 papers under a pseudonym. 3 have been cited by academic institutions she has never visited. 1 has been cited. She discovered through a contact in the Department of International Magical Cooperation by a research group in Japan she did not know existed, working on a parallel theoretical framework she would like to read in full and has made formal contact to obtain. The work is this. She is mapping the complete operational logic of magic. Not its effects. The effects are documented extensively, competently, well, the mechanism. The underlying structure. The grammar of it rather than its vocabulary. She is 7 years in. She estimates she is perhaps a quarter of the way through the first volume. She does not find this discouraging. She finds it correct. The most important problems are the ones that cannot be finished in a single working life. The work does not need to be finished by her. It needs to be begun properly, documented precisely, left in a state where the next person who is capable of continuing it can find it without losing 3 years to the mistakes she made in the first phase. This is what she means by architecture, not the completion of a structure, the laying of foundations that will hold weight she cannot yet calculate for purposes she cannot yet specify. September 14, 2005, the Death Chamber. 11:47 in the evening. She comes here once a month. Not on a schedule, she resisted scheduling it, because some things should remain voluntary in the specific sense of chosen each time, rather than habituated. She comes when she decides to come, and she decides to come approximately once a month, and she stands in front of the veil with her detection array and her notebook, and she takes readings. The veil's frequency has not changed in 7 years of measurements. It is the one constant in her dataset. Everything else she measures accumulates variation. Because everything else is embedded in time and time produces drift, but the veil's frequency is the same on September 14, 2005, as it was on the night she first stood in this room at 16. Unauthorized, certain that something here was worth understanding. She does not know what is on the other side. She has 7 years of measurements and 3 theoretical frameworks, and none of them resolve the question. The veil is not a wall with a door. It is not a threshold between 2 mappable locations. It is something for which she does not yet have adequate vocabulary, which is the category of problem she finds most worth working on. She stands in front of it. The gray fabric moves against the sourceless air. The frequency she has memorized reads clean and steady against her detection array. The same note it has always been. Patient in the way that only very old things are patient, not waiting, exactly, but simply continuing, indifferent to whether it is observed. She opens her notebook to a fresh page. At the top she writes the date. Beneath it she writes the frequency reading, precise to 4 decimal places. Beneath that she writes the 3 observations that distinguish tonight's measurement from last month's, in ways too small to be significant, but too consistent to discard. Then she writes the question she has been writing on the last line of every death chamber entry for 7 years. The one that is not a conclusion or a hypothesis but a direction. The thing she is aiming at from whatever distance she currently stands. What is the operating principle of a threshold that only moves in one direction? She reads it back. She does not have the answer. She has better tools for finding it than she had last month. Slightly better than the month before. Considerably better than 7 years ago, and entirely inadequate compared to what she will have in 7 more years if she works with the precision the problem requires. She caps her quill. She closes her notebook. She looks at the veil for a long moment, not with reverence, not with fear, with the focused and patient and entirely undeceived attention she has given everything worth understanding since she was 11 years old, sitting in a cold circular room, watching the stars move across a midnight ceiling and deciding that the most important thing was not how much she already knew, but how precisely she intended to find out the rest. The veil moves. The frequency holds steady. She turns and walks toward the door, her footsteps even on the stone floor, her notebook under her arm, her mind already 3 steps ahead of her feet and moving, as it has always moved toward the next problem, which is where she has always been most completely herself. Behind her, the death chamber continues its patient work of existing at the edge of what is known. She does not look back. She never needs to. She already knows it will be there when she returns. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.